Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. I did a report a couple of weeks back when the Bank of Canada dropped its interest rate by a quarter point. And in that report, I mentioned that it was less about the state of the economy, that quarter point coming down, and more about the state or the desperate attempt to stave off a full-blown recession. Now, honestly, the recession is here. We're in one, and that's based on the definition of the original economists that put forward the word. Last year, the far left changed the definition of it, so now they can tell you, the voter, that they are in fact not having a recession. But you're not foolish. You understand that your money is not going any further. You understand that prices have gone up through the roof. You understand that despite what they say, nothing is changing, nothing is improving. They come out and claim that they're going to do something about the undocumented, but the numbers are higher than they've ever been. They say they're going to do something about food prices, but those are higher than they've ever been. And of course, the list goes on and on of the things that they say one way and turns out to be the opposite. It's no different with the economy, where they try to convince you that everything is wonderful and everything is rosy. In this report, I'm going to show you, based on the labor force survey numbers that were released for July, that things are not, in fact, that rosy. Now, before I get into it, I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this video with all of your friends, all of your socials. I have an open GoFundMe because I really like to get my hands on some better equipment. And I have memberships if you wish to support the channel that way. However, any way that you support the channel, I appreciate. Some of you may remember I did a report on the labor force survey. There's a small video that comes off the webpage. And essentially, the labor force survey is a sampling, a mandatory sampling of people that are on unemployment. However, employment numbers are gathered from other sources. And it's a reflection of how many people are working and how many people are drawing on EI, as they call it. And those numbers were released today. And it's telling that they waited to a Friday to release July's numbers, because the Liberals have been running all over the country saying everything is bouncing back, everything is wonderful. Last week, there was a collapse in the American stock market because of the employment numbers released in not only America, but it rippled into Japan. It rippled into 3 or 4 actual trading markets. And then the next day, they tried to tell you that everything was bouncing back, but it came back nowhere near what was lost. And there is companies all over the place that basically lost, billions of dollars in worth in a day. Then they waited to release Canada's numbers till August, a Friday, so that everybody would be paying attention to something else, right? And I'll just give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So the highlights are the employment was little changed in July. It was only down 3,000 jobs, while the employment rate fell 2% to 60.9. The unemployment rate was unchanged at 6.4%. Now that can be very misleading, because not everybody who's working qualifies for unemployment, and not everybody who is working is trying to gather unemployment. So this number of 6.4 is a bit bizarre, in the sense that sooner or later somebody on the other end is going to run out of unemployment and somebody else must be coming in. And the idea that it would remain unchanged doesn't indicate that no one else is collecting unemployment. It simply means that the people are not qualified, not able to collect unemployment, or it ran out as more people came into the system. There's all sorts of other factors that could be to come into effect, not the least of which is the eligibility for unemployment requires X number of weeks. It requires, there are eligibility requirements that you must meet to be eligible, and the approval process takes a couple of weeks. So if you applied today, you might not get approved until, might even be into September. So to say that number is an accurate reflection is a bit misleading. And I think that what we're seeing here is an attempt to soften the landing of this very brutal fall that we're looking at. 3,000 jobs are gone in the height of summer. That's not a good sign. In July, employment decreased among women by 41,000 jobs, men 15,000 jobs. Those are from 55 and over. Employment also fell among young men 15 to 24, while it increased among men aged 25 to 54. Now, does that say to you that we have a lot of jobs? We lost, 41 and 15 is 56, 76,000 and 48,000 got jobs. So that's a bad indication right there. And the two groups that kind of are the most vulnerable, young men and older people, lost a lot of jobs. And what were these jobs that the men aged 25 to 54 gained? Employment fell in wholesale and retail trade. So that is just a lot of, that could be anything from supplying stores to supplying entire organizations, as well as in finance, insurance, real estate, rental, and leasing. That's a lot of indication that there's not many people selling houses and there's not many people buying houses at the height of summer. People don't really move in the wintertime, not in Canada anyway. They move in the summertime when it's warmer, when there's more daylight, when it's easier, there's no snow on the stairs. And this segment of the economy took a massive hit. 15,000 jobs. 15,000 people are out of work. 15,000 people that didn't have the ability to get employment in those sectors, which are all basically tied to money: finance, insurance, real estate, rental, and leasing. With exception to rental and leasing, the rest of that all goes through a bank. Employment increased in public administration, transportation and warehouse, and utilities. Okay. Then it goes on to tell us in which provinces took the worst hit, and the total hours worked was up by 1%. Now, old economists will tell you the 1% is not an indication of growth. I mean, think of the idea that they will tell you that under 3% inflation is acceptable, but yet when the inflation is 3% and the economic growth is only 1%, there's a disparity there, and you can't allow that kind of gap to continue, which it has been continuing now. I'll be generous and say at least 8 months, but I am certain that we can call it 12. The report goes on to say the employment rate, the proportion of population aged 15 and older who are employed, fell 0.2% to 60.9 in July. The employment rate has followed a downward trend since reaching a high in January and February, and has fallen 9 of the last 10 months. So when I tell you that I'm being generous when I say that we're in a recession from 8 months ago, and the fact that the Liberal government changed the definition to mask that from people who don't understand the way economics actually work, you can see it here represented in the numbers. People are not working, which means that there is no way that the economy is growing. You can say, well, AI is taking some jobs and robotics might be taking some jobs. I mean, I suppose there's some argument to that, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still not stimulated in the economy. A robot doesn't need to go out and spend money. A robot doesn't need to pay its rent, buy groceries, take the person to the movies. And so it's irrelevant in that respect. What is relevant is how much money is going into the pockets of people and how many of them are gainfully employed. And part-time work doesn't qualify as gainfully employed. Think of how many people you know who work 2 or 3 part-time jobs. So if you say, oh, they have one part-time job, then 24,000 part-time jobs must be 24,000 people. No. 24,000 part-time jobs could be as little as 12,000 people struggling, who are now working their faces off because they're running around from, going from one job to the next and still trying to maintain some sort of a lifestyle. However, having said all of that, let's take a look at one of the strongest indicators. If the people that are not working in the 9 out of 10 downward trend isn't enough to convince you, let's look at this next paragraph here. Private sector employment declines. The number of private sector employees fell by 42,000 in July, following 2 months of little change. On a year-over-year basis, private sector employment growth was up by 0.6% or 86,000 jobs. So the private sector was holding on for 2 months, no change, and then all of a sudden it came into July and it released 40,000 people who, for some reason, didn't take advantage of the unemployment or the employment insurance, because we know 42,000 jobs are down, but they are claiming the employment insurance numbers are a little changed. Where did they go? We come back to what I said to you, that number can be kind of misleading. Public sector jobs is kind of a flag. This is how you become one of these socialist governments that you heard about in Argentina, when the guy fired everybody because the government was just so top heavy. Public sector employment rose by 41,000 jobs. So we lost 42,000 in the private sector, but 41,000 rose in the public sector and was up 205,000 jobs compared with the last 12 months. Public sector employment gains over the last year have been led by increases in healthcare, social assistance, public administration, educational services, not seasonally adjusted. These are taxpayer jobs for the most part. Now, there is some argument to support that healthcare could be elder care and those facilities. So those would be paid for by the user of the facility, and that might be a profit-driven that is only getting subsidies from the government. Social assistance, however, is completely and utterly in the purview of the government. Public administration, I mean, let's be honest with you, that's mostly government jobs. So now we see the federal and provincial governments throwing money into their job, into giving people jobs that are not generating any income. The social assistance job doesn't generate any income, so it doesn't create any improvement in the GDP. It gives a false positive on the expenditures because it might have an impact on the GDP when you look at overall people go shopping, but you have to also factor in how much money is being generated by the company, by the country, right? And that money that they're spending has not been generated. It has just been taken from the taxpayer. And as the taxpayer shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, and as the amount of that they have to spend out goes higher and higher, the GDP, of course, will shrink 9 out of 10 in the last 10 months. And so public sector jobs, though, on paper may inflate the numbers. It's an artificial inflation geared to keep people working, but not going to strengthen the economy in any way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, the Liberal government seems to be willing to go into trillions of dollars of debt than to just fix the problem. The educational services are an interesting one, right? Because you think, well, that's schools. That could be daycare. That could be summer programs, right, where people went to camp, which then those jobs come to an end. Now, if we give the benefit of the doubt and say only half of them are summer-related jobs and the other half are people who are gearing up to start school in September with new jobs, we can still see that they're inflating it by quite a bit. That the numbers, though accurate and in no way, shape, or form am I trying to cast shade onto the statisticians who collected these numbers. We can see that the mechanism, based on many of the alterations the liberals and the far left have made to the word recession, can be misleading us to give you an idea of the strength of the the strength of the economy. And don't be fooled, right? They want you to be fooled because they're terrified that there's going to be a recession. But I am paying attention, and you heard me tell you that the real estate numbers are down because people are not buying right now. Toronto is got this weird little sensation where people don't want to sell because they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people don't want to buy because they're hundreds of thousands of dollars overpriced. So they're just sitting there empty, and the guy who built it is screaming, "Hurry up, give me my money!" And the bank is like, "Pay me, pay me, pay me! Like, just get what you can get for it." And the owner and the seller, the seller and the buyer are in the middle trying to get the best price that they can possibly receive. And I'm reading articles where, they're coming under on average about $350,000 under what they paid. Now, the other issue, of course, is that it's $350,000 under what they paid, and it's still netted over $1 million for like a tiny little condominium. And people are not generating that kind of money. $1 million, no matter what you say about inflation, no matter what you say about any of it, is still very hard to achieve. If you make $80,000 and you work 10 years, you still would not have earned $1 million. So there's a lot going on in the real estate market because the high density is not working out, because the price for the market they shut themselves in the foot. Now people are just holding on to their breath while the bank had kept the stock low and then kept the population up with people coming in. The immigration issues that we have, not just one of them, but there's 3 or 4 aspects of it, have created this housing bubble's about to burst. of course, that will ripple right across that will cause a lot of concern for many people. We'll see if it gets that far, if they can avoid it. I don't think they'll be able to avoid it. The best they can hope to do is bring the prices down and sell them off, and there will be a lot of people who are taking a lot of hits, which is one of the reasons why bankruptcies are up through the roof. Now I'm going to wrap here. I wanted to let you know that these numbers, because Chrystia Freeland's going to come out and say, oh, everything is wonderful, and everything is not even close. All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.